Hello, Jet here, and welcome to another Dev Diary for Victoria Free. Dev Diary 2, Capacities. Now, let's just jump straight into this. Hello and welcome to another Victoria Free Dev Diary. Today we will be talking about 3 of the 4 main currencies in-game, namely Capacities, the last being money, which of course we'll come back to later. Now, of course, I'm not Paradox, this is Paradox talking, so I have no extra knowledge or anything, so I can only infer from what's being said here and see. Now, we mentioned in our first Dev Diary that there is no mana in Victoria Free, and since this Dev Diary is about the game's currencies, I want to be clear on what I mean by that. When we say there is no mana, we mean that the resources in Victoria Free arise and are spent in a clearly defined ways that are parts of the simulation. Not from an overly abstract concept or vague idea. There is of course some degree of abstraction involved. All games are abstractions after all. But we want the game's currencies to be strongly rooted in mechanics and not feel arbitrary. Now this is something they're being very careful about because with Imperator Rome there was a lot of negatives about mana. Personally, mana isn't a bad thing, it's how it's implemented, and we'll see what they've done here, which is a very interesting concept, but I'll get into that once they've discussed it a bit. But there's nothing wrong with mana, because mana is just a resource which you build up via an abstracted thing. So technically, gold, by the argument people use for mana's bad, gold is a mana because it's something you build up to spend on things. But it's understood how it works. Is when they're badly implemented, people don't like them. They're not necessarily a bad thing in themselves. Anyway, on to seeing how they've dealt with it in a different and interesting way, which we'll have to see how it works. But enough about that, and on to capacities. There you go, what they said. What exactly are they? Well, for starters, calling them currencies is not accurate. Capacities are not a pooled resource, and are not accumulated or spent, but instead have a constant generation and a constant usage. Similar, for example, to administrative capacity in Stellaris, so it's a cap you've got, and you can increase it. Interesting. And you generally want to keep your usage from exceeding your generation. Each capacity represents one specific area of your nation's ability to govern, and it's used solely for matters of relating to the area. Doesn't quite sound, because admin capacity is a fixed level in Stellaris. It's not quite your spending and it's going one way and the other. So that's interesting to see. We'll see what it goes. It's more admin cap than capacity. Anyway, as mentioned, capacities are not accumulated, so excess generation is not pooled, but instead there is an effect for each capacity which is positive if the generation exceeds the usage, and quite there's an effect for each capacity which is positive if it exceeds the usage, and quite negative if it exceeds the generation. Negative if it exceeds. So basically you get positives being under, negatives being over. That's a very wordy way of saying it. A country that incorporates territories left and right without expanding its bureaucratic core may quickly find itself mired in debt as tax collection collapses under the strain. Bureaucracy, which is one of them, represents the nation's ability to govern, invest, and collect taxes from its incorporated territory. It is produced by the government administration building, and many of the nation's bureaucrats will be employed. All of the nation's incorporated states use a base amount of bureaucracy, which increases with the size of their population, and further increased by each institution, such as education or police. More on those later. That a country has invested in. Okay, yeah, so basically if you invest in things, you can increase your bureaucracy, or use it up. Overall, the purpose of bureaucracy isn't to ensure that there is a cost to ruling over, taxing and providing for your population. Administrating China should not be cheap. The Swedish bureaucracy is currently a bit overworked, and the country could certainly benefit from another government administration building or two. So yeah, so there we've got the bureaucracy, which is currently a negative 53, which gives us effects, 21% deficit, so 21.4% tax waste, which I assume it's being lost. You've got a generation of 250, you can see, and that's from the administration stuff, and the base value is 100, and that's how much we're spending from incorporated states, POPs, law enforcement, education, and all that jazz. So that's interesting to see how it's working. Okay, now it's an interesting way of doing it, and it depends how we implement it, because while I like admin cap, it's not a challenge in Stellaris at the moment, but it's a balancing, and with everything, like mana, or this version of it, capacities rather than mana, it's all a balancing act. So this doesn't necessarily mean it's better, it's about how they implement it. But I like this because it means you've got to expand your infrastructure to expand your nation, which actually works and makes sense for these particular bits and pieces. Authority represents the head of state's personal power and ability to enact change in the country through decree. It is generated from your laws. Generally, more repressive and authoritarian the country, the more authority it will generate. It is used by a variety of actions, such as enacting decrees in specific states, interacting with interest groups, and promoting or banning certain types of goods. Overall, the purpose of authority is to create an interesting trade-off between more and less authoritarian societies. By shifting the distribution of power away from the POPs and into the hands of the ruler, your ability to rule by decree is increased, and vice versa. So the Swedish king has more authority at his disposal than he is currently using, slightly speeding up the rate at which laws can be passed. So if you're not using all your authority, you can push things through. That I like. So basically that kind of represents, if you're using all your authority to control your populace, obviously you're going to have less political power, less influence over other things. Whereas if you're barely having to do use any effort controlling things, you've got more time and effort and energy and people to pressure other places. So there we go. So the benefit is very positive. 7.5% enactment rate, because we've got 30% excess there. And there's where all our generations are from. And our usage is road maintenance. Interesting. And collecting consumption taxes on liquor, so having an extra tax. Influence represents a country's ability to conduct diplomacy and reach on a global stage. It is generated primarily from your rank. Great powers have more influence than major powers, and so on. It is used to support ongoing diplomatic actions and pacts, such as improving relations, alliances, trade deals, subjects, and so on. Overall, the purpose of influence is to force players to make interesting choices about which foreign countries they want to build strong diplomatic relations with. Sweden has plenty of unused influence, so could afford a diplomatic pact or two. So plus 530, 100% extra, so 50% threat decay, which means we are very influential, which means people aren't going to be as annoyed at us when we are doing things which make us look threatening. Now, we'll have to see what that is later on. Ruler trait, ambitious. Oh, plus 200, wow. And yeah, that's cool. And obviously you're using some influence from a personal union with Norway and improving relations with Prussia. Now, this is the one I think is going to be trickier to implement, because influence is something which fits, I personally think, while this is an interesting way of doing it, and it limits what you can do at any one point, this is mana by another name. I think this is a system which would probably work better by being a good mana system with a decent cap, because you don't want to just let people go on. And we'll see. I think this one could feel a bit shoehorned, if I'm honest. And I get why people don't like the manner of building up a political influence, but again, to me, political influence it's political capital. So you're a shiny new politician who's just come to power. You've just won an election by a landslide. Your party is behind you. The political party, the politicians are behind you. Diplomats want to curry favour with you. You have lots of political capital. political capital. As time goes on, you call in favours and things, and you spend that political capital, therefore they're less likely to do things for you. It doesn't instantly reappear next year. It takes time to regenerate, build that up. You've got to take effort, so your political thought, your diplomatic core has to go out and build, you drive your tanks through a country, push to force them to let you drive your tanks through a country, you march your armies through a country. They're going to be annoyed at you, and that's going to take time, and you're going to have to focus a lot of your diplomatic effort and use a lot of your diplomatic contacts from all over the world, actually, to pressure that nation. Because it sounds daft. It doesn't just use the diplomats in that nation to pressure it. You might use your diplomats in America or Sweden, for example, here, to pressure that country, the people there to pressure that country. So taking diplomatic actions isn't just a single thing. So I personally think this would fit a mana system, a well-implemented mana system, better, because I think it's a more realistic way of doing it. But I completely understand why they are trying to get away from it. I just hope it's still a really well thought out system. My worry here would be that, and I think Paradox have the ability to pull this off, don't get me wrong, I'm really looking forward to this game. My worry here is that they're worried about doing mana because of the backlash it had in Imperator, and that worry is going to make them shoehorn other systems in here, which may not work as well. But I'm waiting to see how they do this. I think they've got the ability to do it, and we'll see how it goes, because that's all we can do. And I've got confidence that no matter what they do, it will be a good game. And obviously you've got money there as well. That's all for today. Join us next week as I cover yet another topic, something that's fundamental to Victoria 3. Buildings. See you then. Okay, so that's a very interesting dev diary. Let's see. I can't filter by that at the moment. Don't think we've had any dev replies yet, so yeah. Oh no, yeah. No. So yeah, no dev replies yet, but it's an interesting dev diary, and it's a really interesting way of managing these systems. Again, as with all systems, it's about implementation and understanding how it's implemented, because the downside with having capacities like this is you can't build up and then do a splurge, which is something which happens in real life. A nation will build up, it'll take time garnering political relations and things, and then take large sweeping actions. The thing with this is I think this will make it harder than a mana-based system would do. However, it's got its own other benefits, which is it will work really well for certain things like bureaucracy. I think it works really well for. Authority, I like the idea of that, but influence is where I think it will potentially struggle, because I think influence is something you should be able to build up over time. It should be almost, rather than having a hard cap, it should have a soft cap, as in, as it increases, it gets harder to increase. So it's almost a reverse exponential curve, if you see what I mean. So going from 1 to, each time it goes up a tick, the next tick takes longer, or, the next tick is halved, and the next tick is halved. I'm not saying that would be amount, but in a way like that. So it's got an effective cap on it. But I think, personally I think a mana-based system would be better for certain actions. But that is my opinion, and please let me know why you disagree with me, because I'm sure a lot of you will, down below in the comments, guys. As always, if you have enjoyed this, please do like and subscribe. And an extra special thank you to all of my channel members and Patreons. You really do help make a difference and help make all this possible. And as always, thank you very much to everybody for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this. Cheers, guys.